Now, it's hard to believe that someone could be trained to sit in a room, zero in on a blind target, and come up with accurate information about something that is somewhere else in space and time. But we watched it for ourselves. It's called remote viewing, and the U.S. military spent $20 million to develop this mind-boggling technique.
So in this video, we're going to be exploring a truly fascinating topic, which is that of psychic abilities. Is it possible that there is more to the mystery of consciousness within each one of us than anything that we have yet to discover? Yeah, it is absolutely possible. In fact, I'm going to take this a step further and make a bold claim here, which is that right now, there exists overwhelming statistical evidence based directly on modern research that psychic abilities are actually real in a way that we have yet to understand. I'm going to attempt to defend that claim over the course of this video. As much as modern science dismisses this topic and even ridicules the idea of any kind of extrasensory perception, did you know that there is a massive body of data and research into this topic going back more than 100 years, such as this article here titled "An Assessment of the Evidence for Psychic Functioning"? Some of the findings that I'm going to share today might truly surprise you. And the true story of research into psychic abilities is just amazing. It includes a top secret CIA research program called Project STARGATE, which developed a technique for psychic espionage called remote viewing. This is all real. It sounds like something out of a fiction novel, but again, some of the findings that came out of this research are just amazing. And to say the least, if any of this is true, if there is any truth or reality to the idea of extrasensory perception, telepathic abilities, psychic abilities, the implications are enormous. They are revolutionary. This would revolutionize our understanding of the nature of mind, of consciousness, and of the cosmos, of reality itself, right? I believe that this body of research could be a key helping us to evolve and awaken to higher consciousness. That's really what this channel is all about. So let's get right into it. Now, my name is Jonas. Welcome back to a channel all about psychedelic education and consciousness exploration. Real quick, today we're trying a little bit new format for the video. Just trying to streamline the creative process here and keep getting out more content more regularly. If you could leave any feedback in the comment section below if this is working for you, it's really greatly appreciated. It helps me get better at doing what I'm doing. And if you appreciate this content, a like, a subscription, liking and subscribing, it really goes a long way in supporting this channel and this work. Truly appreciated. So let's get right into this. Now, it's worth noting that as seemingly super normal as psychic abilities are, they're also remarkably and surprisingly common. Did you know that according to survey data, 41% of adults in the United States believe in extrasensory perception? That's according to a Gallup poll in the early 2000s. Not only that, according to another survey, 1 in 3 adults in the United States report having an experience that they would describe as psychic in nature. So as kind of dismissed as this topic is, so seemingly psychic experiences happen all the time and are very common. Now let's just touch on the mystery of consciousness to set the stage here. For years on this channel, we've been discussing the fact that the consciousness within each one of us is arguably the single greatest mystery facing modern science today. Just in a recent video, we discussed the hard problem of consciousness, which is this idea that it is a complete mystery how a physical brain gives rise to non-physical mind or consciousness. If a single atom doesn't have any consciousness, how can a collection of atoms come together to all of a sudden produce consciousness? Why isn't all of this brain activity just happening in the dark with no one here to perceive it? No one has an answer to that question, right? And the idea that the brain produces consciousness is just a belief. It's an assumption. It's a theory. There are many other possible theories. If we consider some of these other theories of consciousness, such as the idea that consciousness is fundamental, or that there's more to what we are than the physical body, that consciousness is non-local, all of a sudden, telepathic abilities, psychic abilities become very plausible. All of a sudden, we have a very feasible, plausible framework to explain the reality of psychic abilities and psychic phenomena. Going to touch on psychic abilities throughout history. This goes back way deep into history. You may have heard of, just as an example, the Oracle of Delphi. And this was an individual who was believed to deliver prophecies from the god, the deity Apollo. And this oracle was seen as such an important and visionary figure that politicians and generals would come and seek her counsel to predict the outcome of wars, to inform political action and policy. And there are historical accounts of this oracle correctly predicting future events, right? Now, as well, in the Hindu tradition, we have these sacred wisdom texts called the Upanishads. And in the Upanishads, it describes the process of yogic advancement, of spiritual growth and realization. And it describes in these ancient texts from thousands of years ago, these cities, which are described as seemingly superhuman powers and abilities that are the product of yogic advancement, right? Including but not limited to psychic abilities. In these ancient texts, they describe the power to know the past or the future, to hear and see things at great distance, right? So this was described in the Upanishads thousands of years ago. Then we also have a legacy of seemingly psychic abilities in shamanistic traditions from all different corners around the world, right? Bearing in mind that shamanism has appeared in virtually every single indigenous society around the world. And part of the role of the shaman was this idea of divination or prophecy, right? Similar to the oracle at Delphi. To the shaman, the medicine man or woman would enter into a non-ordinary state of consciousness, which was sometimes described as entering into the spirit realm, then bringing back insights and information and guidance from the spirit realm or the spirit world, which would, in some cases, help to predict future events, but also locate missing people, locate missing items. I mean, there are stories of this that continue on into shamanism in the present day. So now this brings us into the modern era and the present day. It's just kind of laying that framework, setting the stage that this goes all the way back into the distant past. Now this here, you can see an image of an individual named J.B. Rhine. This is the individual who really brought the topic of psychic abilities into the domain of serious scientific inquiry, of rigorous scientific methodological research, right? J.B. Rhine was an individual, he was a professor of psychology at Duke University in the early 1900s, and he established a lab at Duke to research psychic abilities. He sort of founded the discipline of parapsychology, which we can define as the study of alleged psychic phenomenon, such as extrasensory perception, telepathic abilities, precognition, clairvoyance, and other seemingly anomalous experiences, such as near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, past life memories, synchronicities, mediumship. And there's a lot to be said here about this whole topic of parapsychology. Research into psychic abilities is just kind of one subset in this greater field of parapsychology. And again, it's interesting how mainstream science kind of rejects parapsychology almost entirely as a discipline, because parapsychology doesn't fit in with the materialist paradigm that modern science is in, which says that physical matter is the fundamental reality. Parapsychology in all these different ways is pointing to this realization that no, actually, that's not true. There's more to reality than this physical universe, and there's more to what we are than a physical body, right? Now, this field, I'll also just briefly note, is only getting bigger and more well-established with incredible parapsychological organizations such as the Division of Perceptual Studies at University of Virginia, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, founded by astronaut Edgar Mitchell, the Society for Psychical Research, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, and on and on. These are just a few. There's many incredible organizations doing this research right now. Back to J.B. Rhine. We can see here one of his actual early research trials. And you can see on the back of this board 5 cards. These are called Zener cards, which each has a symbolic representation. There's 5 of them, right? And the way this trial works is that there would be a target card identified from the researcher, which the test subject would then try to identify, right? And given that there's 1 in 5, you would expect that over enough trials, there would be a 1 in 5 or 20% chance of correctly guessing the right card. And J.B. Rhine found that actually, in some cases, there was, in a statistically significant way, a higher than chance hit rate, right? Based on his findings, J.B. Rhine wrote this book called Extrasensory Perception, where he argued that extrasensory perception is actually real and demands further scientific research because he reported statistically significant results in numerous of his experiments beyond what would be expected by chance alone, right? Now, it's worth acknowledging that, of course, this research was met with mixed reviews. There were further attempts to replicate this research with these Zener cards in other independent organizations and mixed reviews, right? Some people found no statistically significant results. Others did find statistically significant results, but as a result, many other scientists sort of dismissed the work and research of J.B. Rhine. But J.B. Rhine really passed on this legacy of establishing the scientific discipline and bringing psychic abilities into the field of scientific research. Now, let's fast forward about 30 or 40 years. In the United States, it's now the Cold War, right? This is the late 60s, early 70s. The U.S. intelligence is receiving intel that the Soviet Union is essentially training psychic spies. And this creates all kinds of consternation and concern. There was all of a sudden an urgent need. This is real historical account. There was an urgent need for the U.S. intelligence agencies to research psychic abilities and psychic phenomena with the intent, essentially, to disprove or to prove that psychic abilities could not possibly be used by the Soviets to compromise any sensitive information, right? And this led to the formation of Project Stargate. The Stargate project was a secret U.S. Army unit established in 1978 to investigate the potential for psychic abilities in military and domestic intelligence applications. Again, this is all true. I mean, it's just incredible. And this program, this top secret program, operated for more than 20 years with millions of dollars in funding and produced thousands of experimental trials. Guys, I mean, please look this up. The history here is just mind-blowing. So it was run by these 2 physicists. One is an individual named Hal Puthoff, and the other is a man named Russell Targ. And essentially, through their early research, Puthoff and Targ came to believe that, yeah, there actually is credible research basis to believe in the reality of psychic abilities. And they together developed a technique called remote viewing, which is essentially a process for tapping into psychic abilities on demand.
The first series of experiments here at Stanford Research Institute were what the scientists called remote viewing.
The work we did at SRI involved things like finding a downed Russian airplane in North Africa with code books on it, locating a kidnapped American general in northern Italy, describing the construction of a huge Soviet submarine in northern Russia, and we even looked at on a Chinese atomic bomb test 3 days before it was scheduled to go off and described correctly that it was going to fail.
So that's Russell Targ speaking to the research they did at SRI. I mean, incredible stuff. Now, let's take a moment just to define remote viewing. And it's essentially a method, again, for tapping into psychic abilities on demand, where an individual attempts to gather information about a distant or unseen target, location, or event using extrasensory perception or psychic abilities. The viewer typically remains in a relaxed meditative state while attempting to perceive details about the target using only their mind and without the use of any physical senses.
Sometimes they were given coordinates for a location, or pictures hidden in sealed envelopes. The task was to draw accurately what they could see only in their minds. How is it done? It seems to defy rational analysis.
I empty my mind and then I center my mind as well as I can. The information most of the time comes in many different fragments. It's usually very difficult to understand. You have to try to build a picture out of it.
So my friends, here we have some examples of actual remote viewing, and you can see on one side the target and on the other side a sketch that was produced by the remote viewer, again using only the power of their mind. So the way this would work is that you can imagine this picture, this image is placed in a sealed envelope where there's a set of letters and numbers identifying the target on the envelope. The remote viewer was told this series of letters and numbers and just encouraged to sense, using their mind, what is the image contained in the envelope. I'll just say again, as amazing as this history sounds, it's all documented. There's a massive paper trail behind this. You can actually go to the CIA website and look up remote viewing and find all these declassified primary documents about the research that happened there, such as this one here, called an evaluation of the remote viewing program, which states a statistically significant laboratory effort has been demonstrated in the sense that hits occur more often than chance. There's a whole litany, there's a whole long list of documents that have been declassified that are available for public viewing on the CIA website here and now today. It's really interesting. Now, some of the findings that came out of Project Stargate are just so phenomenal and incredible. We'll touch on some of the actual research and statistics in a second, but for example, there's one story about a man named Ingo Swann, who's a legendary remote viewer who used this technique to accurately describe rings around Jupiter before we knew that such rings existed, right? Again, you can imagine there's a sealed envelope with a target. He doesn't know that the target is Jupiter. Ingo Swann describes, okay, I'm seeing a planet, and there are these kind of striated bands of color, and oh, isn't that interesting? There's like these rings around the planet. Now, at the time, we didn't know that Jupiter had any rings. It wasn't until the Voyager satellite passed by Jupiter a few years later that it actually confirmed that Ingo Swann's description of the rings around Jupiter were actually correct. There are other stories, such as Russell Targ himself using remote viewing to accurately forecast financial markets and make himself a small fortune. Now, this is another element of remote viewing that kind of deserves independent consideration. We're just going to mention it and leave it on to the side for now, which is that remote viewing, research into remote viewing is not only to things or events distant in space, but also in time. Remote viewing into the past or into the future. This is truly incredible stuff because it just boggles the brain. It throws a monkey wrench into our understanding of the nature of reality and space-time, right? It's really challenging to understand. But again, here we have an individual, Russell Targ, who's accurately forecasting future financial markets. And here's the thing, again, this isn't just about a few lucky guesses. This is about overwhelming statistical evidence here, overwhelming statistical evidence. So this brings us into this article, an assessment of the evidence for psychic functioning. It was written by a lady named Jessica Utz, who was the president of the American Statistical Association, and she was essentially contracted to independently, kind of unbiased, do statistical analysis of the findings out of Project Stargate. And she writes, in 1998, an analysis was made of all the experiments conducted at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, from 1973 until that time in 1998. The analysis was based on all 154 experiments conducted during that era, consisting of over 26,000 individual trials, with a total of 227 subjects in all those experiments. Right? She writes, the statistical results were so overwhelming that results that extreme or more so would occur only once in about every 10 to the 20 such instances if chance alone is the explanation. Guys, this is truly mind-blowing, okay? Let me just repeat what she's saying here. Statistically, if the results out of the remote viewing research were by chance, the odds of that happening by chance would be 1 in 10 to the 20th power, 10 followed by 20 zeros. I don't even know what that number is, okay? But just for some reference, that's 1 trillion times 100 million. 1 in 1 trillion times 100 million. This is what we mean by overwhelming statistical odds. And she says, obviously, some explanation other than chance must be found. So what we're looking at here is that there's something going on with reference to remote viewing and psychic abilities that we have no explanation for. There's a genuine mystery here that cannot be explained by chance, right? Now, the critical feedback to this article and to the whole remote viewing research is that, well, okay, if this is really legit and true, it needs to be replicated. It's something that needs to be repeatable at other research institutions. And so that's exactly what happened. So further research into remote viewing was conducted at Princeton University. There was a research lab there called PAIR Lab, Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, right? And I believe this was back in the 90s. There was an article titled Replication of Remote Viewing, which endeavored to represent formal replications of the SRI experiments of Puthoff and Targ. So now we have an independent team trying to repeat or replicate the findings out of Stanford Research Institute, and they conducted over 653 remote viewing sessions. And the hit rate was high enough there in their research that the odds of their findings being made by chance was 1 in 33 million, right? And the authors of this article state, the results in all phases of this experimental program are quite consistent with those out of SRI. So again, here we are looking at incontrovertible statistical evidence. And we're in this interesting position here where the world we live in seems like everyone's saying that remote viewing and psychic abilities are impossible, are ludicrous, are ridiculous, and yet we have overwhelming statistical evidence which amounts to proof that there's something going on here, right? Now, we can zoom out even a little further and just acknowledging the field of parapsychology. The research which I've referenced so far in this video is just scratching the surface. Thousands and thousands of research experimental trials that have been documented in academic literature, right? Really trying to keep this grounded and scientific. This is not just a fantasy. This is research. This is data. The weight of evidence here is so great. I mean, it does boggle my mind how there's not more people talking about this, right? If we take a moment just to sit with this extraordinary possibility that within each one of us, there are latent, hidden potentials and abilities of mind and consciousness that we have yet to discover. Think about the possibilities. Think about how this could evolve going forward into the future. Think about how humankind could evolve as individuals and as a collective. I mean, it's truly amazing to think about, to really sit with the reality that there is more to our consciousness, there is more to our mind than this physical body and brain. There's more, right? And again, it goes without saying that this research can, and I'm convinced inevitably will, revolutionize our entire understanding of the nature of mind and consciousness and the nature of reality itself. Just in the same way that we came to realize that Earth is not at the center of this universe, inevitably we're going to realize that physical reality is not at the center of existence either, right? Now, just briefly, I want to share a few thoughts on how we can begin to understand or make sense of telepathic abilities? What are some of the theoretical explanatory models? And there are existing scientific theories which help us to begin to just kind of sketch ideas about what's going on here. And specifically, I'll reference non-local consciousness, multiverse theory or interdimensionality, and quantum entanglement, right? Just ideas to play with. So non-local consciousness, this is an existing scientific theory that consciousness is fundamental. It's not localized in the physical body and brain, right? Consciousness isn't contained in the physical brain. Rather, consciousness is fundamental and the body and brain are contained within consciousness. Imagine our consciousness as like a wave on the surface of an infinite ocean, an infinite field of consciousness. From that perspective, it makes more sense that there are parts of us that are beyond our physical sensory understanding that can tap into somehow, in some incredible, mysterious way, other information, right? Beyond the physical, beyond the kind of localized part of our consciousness. That taps into this idea of quantum entanglement. And I know people throw around the word quantum all the time, but we know this idea of quantum entanglement where on a deep enough, fundamental enough level, everything is interconnected. Everything is entangled. Everything exists as unified expressions of a infinite reality, right? And so again, this is kind of just an idea to play with, that maybe we can kind of entangle with this information over here. If everything is interconnected, maybe there is a way in this non-local field, this unified field of consciousness, to tap into information seemingly way over there, so to speak, distant in space or in time, right? Now, again, I'm just kind of spitballing here. Like, some of this sounds ridiculous even to me. We're just playing with these ideas, right? And what if reality is interdimensional? This is multiverse theory, right? What if there's more beyond the physical? Again, this is creating a framework by which we can view this very strange and mysterious phenomenon of remote viewing, telepathic abilities, psychic abilities from a totally different lens, right? And which all are, again, pointing in the direction of this realization and affirmation that there is so much more to the mystery than the physical. And the more we realize that there is way more to the mystery, the more we open our minds to that reality, the more that we expand. And the more that we expand, the more that humankind as a collective expands and awakens, right? This is why I say that this is just one key, it's one part of the spiritual awakening and evolution of humankind, which is desperately needed here on the planet today. So thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed speaking on it. And please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Again, I think this stuff is just absolutely fascinating and so important, right? Please check me out over on Patreon where you can support this work. It goes a really long way and I'm truly grateful. Thank you so much, and I'll see you back here very soon.